Hey, good evening, Galion. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary. Welcome back to our Facebook Live Monday night before the council meeting. Wanted to start out. I like to spend a lot of time in these meetings answering questions, or in these conversations answering questions, and looking forward, as they say, about what's going on in Galion, what's going to happen in Galion. But I wanted to stop for a few minutes here at the outset and just remind citizens that last Thursday the state of Ohio did release Galion from fiscal emergency, which brings to the end a 14-year ordeal. I believe those inside city government, in City Hall, it's been 14 years of hard work and sacrifice, not so much at City Hall, but certainly among the departments that work hard to provide service for the residents and taxpayers. So it was important to us to earn that release, and in some important ways, it's important to the city of Galion. You know, I said Thursday, and I want to repeat it tonight, that the greatest vote of thanks and the real heroes, if you will, the reason we were able to get released from fiscal emergency were two factors, and they both involve city taxpayers, city residents. One was the overall patience that they had with city government. Certainly before we switched back to the mayor, it seemed like nothing was ever going to happen. And then since I became mayor, it's been longer than I expected, I think longer than some folks hoped, to get this release or earn this release. But we're there, and the patience, the overall patience that was shown is really something in my mind needs to be recognized. The other item that's real important that saved city government as we know it, and that was the passage of a couple of income tax issues, which really enabled the city police and fire department, EMS, to remain municipally run, municipally operated, and quite frankly, the best, in my view, in the county in terms of those types of safety forces. Some people will remember, and again, this is about the end of looking in the rearview mirror, some people will remember the report that was issued by the state auditor that recommended a number of things that the city should do. And among those things were look at having the sheriff's department provide police support, phase out a professional firefighter, driven or staffed fire department, go to a private EMS operation, and all of those less than best outcomes or solutions to the problems we were in were alleviated or eliminated from the list of options when voters supported the income tax. That is real critical then, since it was voted, and on in today and into next year's budget and budgets going forward. So taxpayers' patience and willingness to fund municipal operations for those key areas, I think were absolutely the reason we're here tonight on our own, and really kind of excited about some of the things that will continue to happen in the community. Switching a little bit to that topic, there were some questions that came in after we finished up 2 weeks ago, and one of them involved commenting about liking to see the expansion at Covert and wondering what the city was working on, or if there are other projects, a potential growth in the wings. I'd say it really is an important, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, when you have your largest industrial employer decide to invest more in your community. And some people in the community that are my age remember when that stopped happening in the 70s and throughout the 70s and early 80s in Galion, and a lot of the negative things that happened in terms of population and employment. A lot of the things that we remember. Younger people don't remember it, but they've been told enough times that, remember when it was like that. Well, what Covert's did was really point us in a different direction, in that they're a large employer. and they decided when they had an opportunity to grow their business that they committed to growing it in this community. So that can't be overstated. As far as the other part of the question, we've had an initial discussion with our tenant down at the what we call the South Street Commerce Center that we've rented since it was given to us when HTI left town, and that's real encouraging. It looks like that we'll be negotiating a purchase option with Mosier Industrial, and then begin a conversation about some expansion. That in our discussions, in our conversation, is really just getting going. I get the feeling that in the minds of the business that they've been thinking about how to expand here for a couple of years. So that's real positive, and we're going to know about that early next year as we try to nail down the negotiations on that real estate. The other area that's I believe is ripe for growth is out at the old Pico facility. Again, we've talked a little bit about in the past. There's an owner, local owner, and a willingness and an interest in reshaping that property. So things that you hear about probably demolishing some of the buildings and then rebuilding new on that site, that is the plan, and I'm pretty optimistic that those kinds of development sites are very much within our grasp, and you'll begin to see results from those two efforts going forward. Last thing I'll say is the community, not just Galion, but probably all of Crawford County, really needs a larger industrial park facility. Way back in the 80s, I remember people critical of the county commissioners at that time for expressing that belief that we needed an industrial site for this county, and that idea, that determination turned into Crossroads, and we all in this county see how that's helped transform Bucyrus and keep it growing. So we're really at a point in this county where we need an industrial park, and so that's something that the city, I think, will be focusing on over the next several years, because we really have limited number of development sites, and so yeah, there is a plan. The question that came in last week, is there any plan? And I said, yeah, I could go on longer about the plan. There certainly is one, and I think that's really where a lot of our emphasis will shift to, trying to have the tools, the resources to do major industrial development.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. First question tonight came in earlier from Dave. He asks, why is the city giving free water to demolition contractors tearing down rundown houses and hotels?
Well, the probably two reasons for it. One is that there isn't any kind of ready way to charge for the water. And in some situations, it's easier to allow them to tap into the hydrant rather than bring in a water truck. That would be the other logical alternative. Not having water to keep dust, from bothering other neighborhoods is not an option. So I think that what Dave brings up is a good idea to bring in front of council, and I'll talk with them about whether or not we should institute some sort of charge or fee when a demo permit rather is issued, and there's a fee attached to that. Maybe what we need to do is add a fee for the use of water, but not using the water is really not an option. In the case that I think Dave's talking about, that hotel, I guess hearing feedback from citizens about that is better than driving by that dang thing every day and wondering, when it was going to get torn down. So I hope everyone agrees. Don't like the equipment still sitting in that particular demo location, but I think that's the owner and the contractor's responsibility. But I'm sure glad that hotel's gone, and that corner at Jefferson and Harding Way, looks a lot better as a result.
Okay, thank you. This question also came in earlier. It's from Samantha. She asks, what is the future plan for the homeless in our town when other places are too full?
Yeah, I think other places would be other emergency shelters or places for homeless. Um, I'll answer that a couple different ways. It's hard to put your finger on homelessness in rural areas. Handful of years ago, when I was the director at the county JFS, there was a real push on homelessness, and we were asked by the state agency, the state Department of Job and Family Services, to try to identify in terms of numbers the homeless in this county. And in those days, the homeless numbers were relatively small, and so it was hard to put a finger on actual homeless. Now I know of, stammered a little bit there, I know of people who live in their cars and park their vehicles in different places around the town, sort of from night to night. What we're not going to do is actively enforce that and turn that into a criminal case. What we ought to do when you run into someone or you know a situation like that is everybody's got a couple extra sandwiches in their house, almost everyone. And I know this year when we were running the greater operation, we'd have home games. We feed 40, 50, 60 kids, 35 or so on each team. There's food left over. Yeah, we enjoyed meeting some of the people I'm talking about who live in their vehicles and spend a lot of time in the parks, and so you just do that. So I think part of it is if somebody is down on their luck without a meal or something, you got extra, you feed them, and that's an important part. But in terms of a city-run homeless shelter, I'm not going to make that a top priority. What people who are concerned about homelessness, however, should ask questions of the Adams H Board, because many in this kind of economy where unemployment is really pretty low, no matter what your political feelings are, unemployment's low and every employer is looking for. You drive around, you see now hiring signs. So what you see now in people with limited resources and limited employment, there's usually a mental health component to that. And so we the property taxpayers pay to help support the Adams Board, and so one of the things that they may want to consider is having a pool of funds that can assist in temporary housing to assist or add more resources to those temporary housing dollars that are available through the Red Cross and Salvation Army. So if the question is, should the city start running a program, I don't think I wouldn't agree with that. Should the community pool resources among charitable organizations and traditional groups that provide that kind of assistance? Absolutely. And we would support that, but I think it's not the way to go to have the city institute programs and when there are other resources, other organizations for whom their mission is homeless and mental illness and those sorts of things. So, not if it's a case where we get somebody who streams this or sees it live and has internet, who's homeless, and that might be the case. I'm not saying everyone who's couch surfing or without a permanent place to stay is they're all mentally ill, but there's a real strong correlation, and the people who work with that population to begin with should be thought of as being most responsible for providing housing, and to graft on city government, I think it'd be a step backwards.
Okay. Next question tonight comes from Tim. He asks, is Avita moving into the former Geyers space?
Yeah, not that I know of. Unless there's a service line that's attached to selling groceries, I wouldn't expect that. So I don't think so. They really are focused on providing services for which insurance companies and government covered insurance or covered insurance programs, they really provide services that are covered by those types of things. So I don't think so. I think as far as the Guyers, I had I don't know, more calls last week than I've had since they started to people complain about empty shelves. And the answer is really the same. What I expect is that a renovation of one of the existing operations, I'm hoping Save-A-Lot remodels, don't know that for sure. And that when some of the financial problems that hang a cloud over the Guyers building can be cleared, I fully expect a couple of competitive grocery chains to bid for that property. But there's some financial complications, like I say, like a cloud hanging over it. And but to go back to the original question, I've not heard anything about Avita. And there's some really awesome developable ground right in and around the hospital. In fact, the city sold through the CIC a few years ago over 30 acres to Avita for $11. So if they're going to do some expanding, I sure hope they'd follow the trend of the pediatric center and the old children's services and utilize that properly zoned or specifically zoned medical services area to do any kind of expansion.
Okay. Next question tonight comes from Mike. He asks, is there any progress being made on the bike path in Galion?
Yes. What we're waiting on now is for the leaves to drop so as to make the survey work along the 50-foot right-of-way that we traded with the Levant family, vacated some streets. So instead of having right-of-way that the city had on dedicated but never developed streets in order to put the bike path, we're going to have a 50-foot swath that really moves along I guess it would be the north side of the old Intangi through there, sort of the west, and then if you know the creek, it turns and then runs a little bit east-west. We'll be on the north side of that, and as the leaves drop, it'll allow the surveyors to get a good shot. We'll get a good outline this fall, and I really think you'll see some trees cleared. And as far as the project itself, Mike, it's really not going to take a long time to construct it. And my hope is that it'll be, because we'll do it to our specifications and not those specs that are required if we'd used federal funds, we'll be able to move out and get it done a lot more quickly. So I think next year, our plan next year is to complete that in terms of recreation or parks projects, is to finish that project and get that new playground apparatus that I kind of teased a couple weeks ago with pictures of what's on the drawing board for that. So, yep, we're committed to it, and start with survey work this fall, come up with a design over the winter, and then let it out to sale sometime next year.
Okay. Cindy had two questions regarding demolition work. First, she asked if the former Neff's building is being torn down, and then a follow-up to that, can't anything be done about the old East School building?
Well, yes. On the first half of the question, it is being torn down. The good news, in part, is that it's being torn down with federal community development block grant funds. The Galion competed with the rest of the communities in the county for those funds. Due to some bureaucratic changes that only geeks like myself would find interesting and fun to talk about, under the Kasich administration, they took those kinds of grants away from the cities our size and gave them to the county commissioners in counties of our size. As a result, that project isn't administered by the mayor's office, by City Hall, but is being administered through the county commissioner's office. Yeah, it's being torn down, and I think it was either to start a little bit last week, and I think over this week and the next couple of weeks is really when that demo will happen. Under that program, the ownership of the land underneath the building, the real property, stays with the owner. So that area between Bender, down at kind of the bottom of the hill on Bueller, and that building, all of that is owned by Community Action. And our hope, I happen to get to sit on the board of Community Action, which is an honor to be able to do that. Anyway, their goal, I believe, is similar to our goal, and to see that be put into play, if you will, for residential building lots. That's what it's zoned for. So if you imagine the Neff site free of all that's out there, and those properties being divided into building lots, I think that's would be a nice place for 3 or 4 units, and that's the plan there. So is that I think it seemed like there was a second half to that. Or
yes, the former East School building.
Yeah, East School. I think probably the biggest difference in those 2 buildings is that Community Action was in agreement and was interested in doing the demo, and the estimated cost, and actually the eventual cost of tearing it down, was within the block grant limits. So I think with East School, it's, from what I understand, although I haven't seen an updated estimate of demolition cost, I think that I know the cost would be much higher. And that's one factor, and probably the more important factor is the owner of that property has never really expressed an interest in demolishing it. So I wouldn't count on that happening, but the pathway to having East School demolished is the owner deciding they were interested in doing that, and then finding enough owner money, or as they say, other people's money, probably federal block grant monies, that could be put those 2 ingredients together and it could come down. The land bank, which is another entity that's been responsible for getting some of those abandoned and dilapidated residential properties torn down, is exclusively, particularly at this point, they're running low on money, but at this point they've confined their activity to residential property, even though everyone involved in this recognizes there's some commercial properties in pretty bad shape.
Okay. Next topic is Kobe Park. Samantha wants to know who does the maintenance at the park, in particular grass and trash along the trails back there.
The city workers are responsible for mowing it. As far as and so city park workers would also be responsible for picking up trash. We mow them with big tractors, so there's no plan, there's no effort to go back there with small mowers or 360. What are the things called without a steering wheel?
Zero turn.
Zero turn. There you go. What a mechanical genius you have for a mayor. But zero turns, we really don't mow much back there in that area. Based on the question, I'm guessing that there's trash back in the trails, and we ought to send somebody. We will, based on Samantha's comment, make sure somebody's out there to pick that up. We'll be moving pretty quickly. I was looking at the budget today, both to see where we're at in 18 and then start to think ahead into 19. And we'll be out of the parks in terms of staffing here in a few weeks, and really switching over to leaf pickup. So while we're still dedicating man hours and labor hours to park maintenance, we'll get somebody out there and see what we have in terms of trash. But I think the real answer is everyone knows who's out at Kobe Park. It gets limited usage, and as a result, we really don't have the same maintenance regime or maintenance activity that we do have in some of the other parks. So, amazing number of questions tonight. I really appreciate that. If there are more coming in, or I don't think there's any more to sitting on hold tonight. But if there aren't, I think I'm getting the wind up from our producer and technical person. So I want to thank everyone for watching and the questions you have. To me, I continue to be amazed at what causes some nights to have more interest as we're doing it, and then in a similar session, you'll see a lot after, watch tonight, tomorrow, the next day. So there must be a number of people interested tonight. I appreciate that, and want to continue it. I would say, mindful of the time, sorta, I would say that I presented at City Council a couple of weeks ago the idea of televising, I guess that's still the word, narrowcasting council meetings, and also the possibility of some committee meetings, because I really believe that information about what's going on in city government is harder to come by these days. And so I think council will have a discussion about that. But if I have a feeling that people who take the time to watch this or replay this are the kinds of Galionites who'd be interested in being able to record or tune in to council meetings. So if you do feel that way, and you know some people on council, give them the encouragement to go ahead and include the equipment and some budget for operating that it would take to televise those meetings. So with that commercial and all that stuff, I'll say thank you and appreciate people. I'm not going to sign off and either jinx like I did a couple weeks ago with the Steelers fans. I apologize. If I had a Steeler jersey, I'd eat it. And then I made the mistake that one should never do in politics, small p or large p, either one, and that is to start recognizing sports teams and then think of ones I didn't mention. So it's really going well for Galion area kids. Really excited to see it, and this Friday the golf team will be in Columbus shooting for a state championship, which is, it's if you know the kids, it's easy to believe, but on the other hand, it's kind of amazing that 5 kids from Galion go down there and have a chance to bring back a state championship. So good luck, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks.